Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're going to be talking about Warhammer The Old World because it's been 1 year since it released. I know, it's been a year already, it's super weird, right? We've had a bunch of changes since we last did this video in a 6-month margin, so I feel like 1 year is a great way to kind of celebrate that. So let's talk about it. There's quite a lot to actually discuss as what's been released, what's still to come, and some expectations for the future. Alright, so we're going to talk about the factions so far, because originally when we did it in 6 months, Bretonnia, Tomb Kings, Orcs and Goblins were released and the Dwarfs were in pre-order. All of these have now been released so far, the Empire has also been released and so have the Warriors of Chaos, meaning that we do need the Wood Elves, the High Elves, and the Beastmen. The High Elves have already been revealed, so that I guess is going to be coming soon, depending on how quick they're going to be. But they have been a lot faster in the last 6 months than they have been in the first 6. And starting from this year, the Empire had its 2 waves back to back. And I mean it properly back to back, as the day after the release of the core Empire stuff, well, they had already announced the second wave, so things seem to be ramping up, which kind of falls on the rumors that they want everything out this year for the first edition, so brand new stuff can start coming out ASAP to keep up with the sales. Now, obviously that's not it. We do need to wait for other races, Cathay, Kislev, and apparently the Dogs of War, but those are all very faint rumors. Now, Cathay isn't really much of a rumor anymore, because they've said, you know, there's something to come, and the artwork that was showcased in that new roadmap is actually the Warhammer 3 art for Cathay, so it looks like Cathay is going to be likely this year, which is kind of expected at the end of the day. Cathay has so much of a terms of roster. I could imagine Cathay getting a full codex in a sense, right? A proper army book. We don't know what's going to happen with the rumors regarding Dogs of War. There has been a map update which has been removed, probably in a backlash of some recent drama. But yeah, you know, Dogs of War is kind of expected at this rate. Some people would be asking, well, why Kislev isn't coming in first? It makes sense to introduce Cathay first. Firstly, because the Great War against Chaos hasn't started yet. Secondly, Cathay is going to make a lot of money if they start releasing the cool stuff. What happens with Cathay could end up being in various different things. It could be one big army book, it could be in the form of arcane journals, it could be in the style of what happened with the Ruminef Realm Lords for Age of Sigmar, which was multiple books, but the third wave is still missing for the Ruminef Realm Lords, so I'm a little bit concerned that they're going to do that, because clearly production issues have kicked in there. Tyrion's still missing for them. I know some of you guys aren't interested in Age of Sigmar, but it's important to look at that release schedule, because that could end up happening for us. Which means that we might get a stripped-down Cathay roster at the beginning, then another book, and then another book, maybe even 4 books. It depends on how much Cathay has actually been done lore-wise. We still don't know the full breadth of Cathay in terms of Total War Warhammer, because we've only just had 1 DLC for Cathay so far. With regards to Dogs of War, well, that's something that I could expect an Arcane Journal just to release pretty much the whole roster that was there for 4th edition, 5th edition, you know, the old school stuff. Mostly metal, going to be very expensive if that's the case. In a perfect world, we would end up getting Southern Realms done properly, but I think that that's something that they're going to do later down the line around the 2nd edition. They do need to have races released around that point too, if we end up getting a 2nd edition, but given that there's rumors that there's going to be another new edition for 30k, maybe this year or the year after, it makes sense that that would be also the same for the Old World. Stock for a lot of the factions seems to have stabilized a little bit. You get a lot more from friendly local game stores though. What I would argue is that there is a lot of stuff which has been out of stock since like the very beginning and just doesn't seem to come back. For the Dwarves, for example, Ungrim, still not being able to pick them up myself, Doomseekers either, but I have been able to pick them up through friendly local game stores. It does seem like Games Workshop is prioritizing that over other places, or even themselves. The same thing with Bretonnia, you know, there's a few issues when it comes to the new Questing Night, the Grail Knights haven't been back. You can get them when you go into Warhammer World, but you have to be in Britain for that. It's kind of frustrating. However, other factions, you know, like the Warriors of Chaos, the Greenskins seem to be alright in terms of stock. Same thing with the Tomb Kings, barring Nakaf and Tomb Scorpions. There's just a few specific things, which is kind of like the centerpiece stuff, which is kind of always missing. And it's a bit frustrating, because I know a lot of people want some more of that, myself included. Whereas of Chaos seem to be in pretty good stock, though, which is very, very nice to see. Empire just recently released, and it just seems that only a few things, like the Witch Hunter, some of the new characters, the command set, and the Battalion box seems to be out. So it does look like they've put my priority into actually having a bunch more stock for people to be able to purchase. Having that reservoir is always quite good. Price-wise, I mean, for the basic plastic stuff, that seems to be alright. Sure, it's a little bit expensive. An Empire box of State Troopers is £52, but you're getting 30 troopers out of that, so you're getting a decent amount. Great swords, again, 20. I wouldn't say that that's worth it for 52 quid. Sometimes the pricing can get weird, and this is because it's price per model and price per points, which does get kind of frustrating. Character models, for example, end up being too expensive. The resin stuff, the new stuff, I had it sent to me by GW, but even I can admit can be quite expensive. A character like the Necromancer, £27 isn't too bad for Forge World resin, so that is fine. But then when you look at, say, for example, Harold Gunnarsson, or whatever his name is, that one is the new Knights Panther character. He's a named character, is very situational, £41. It's a gorgeous model. It's a gorgeous model, but it's a bit too much. This is weird when you look at other characters, because, I mean, the Warrior Priest of Sigmar, I think you get all three of them for like £28. Yeah, £28 for 3 characters. You know, that's great value for money. Or a metal character here and there. The champion, Chaos Champion, is 9 quid. It's so all over the place that it just doesn't really make sense. The Dwarf Ruin Priest being £18. It just feels incredibly inconsistent. And I'm kind of concerned, because obviously Games Workshop do the early price hikes. That's a brand new year here, and I'm kind of concerned about that, not gonna lie. Especially for very old models, right? These are very, very old models. Some of them pretty much as old as I am. They should not be subject to these massive price hikes, because no, the cost is not going up as dramatically as Games Workshop say it does. Alright, Arcane Journal System. Again, we spoke about this 6 months ago. I would say that the Arcane Journal System is quite good. There is weird things happening, though. Like, for example, the factions not making sense with regards to the current plot story points. So, like the Dwarfs, you know, it was the Expeditionary Force and also the Royal Clans. That makes a lot of sense. The Empire has just come out, and it's Null and the Knightly Orders, which is kind of cool. Don't get me wrong there. But, you know, we are in this massive civil war, and we've still had nothing to do with the churches as of yet. Obviously, it's something that we could look towards down the line. We could essentially see a second book or even a third book, but it's odd, right? Same thing with the Chaos Warriors, right? The Chaos Warriors, that's another one that's just already come out. That one was Wolves of the Sea for a Norska list, and then the Heralds of Darkness, which is absolutely bizarre, because they said there's no mono-god clans and stuff like that, but then the Heralds of Darkness is a mono-god style list, which focuses very heavily on cavalry, though, which, again, very situational, very, very situational. We've had a lot of push towards cavalry, actually. If you pay attention to what's been happening, the Orcs and Goblins had a cavalry list with the whole nomad thing, obviously Bretonia. It looks like they seem to really, really enjoy cavalry for some reason. And yeah, I get it, they're good for this edition and so on, but it just doesn't really make too much sense. I'm imagining the Beastmen doing a cavalry list soon, and the Wood Elves also, maybe even the High Elves. My only real issue here is there's not really enough characters being showcased in the Arcane Journal. It does look like we're getting like 2 now, where some books had 3. I don't know, it just feels like more characters could be implemented to pad them up and give you a bit of a reason more to get into the Arcane Journal system rather than just using the Grand Army. The loadouts and the specific faction rules for those loadouts is very, very cool. Definitely needs to be more. I would not be opposed to a second Arcane Journal for the Tomb Kings, and, well, a second or even possibly third for each of the races and factions. So long as they keep it fluffy, and I think that's quite important, and actually start doing stuff that people are expecting, right? Like the next one for Bretonia could be the Harry Malts, you know, going for the whole thing about the Robin Hood aspect, and then maybe even Musalon. There's been rumors of Vampire Count returns, but we'll talk about that when we start talking about the legacy factions. Yeah, same thing with the Tomb Kings, right? Actually, a quick note. The Royal Host for the Tomb Kings just, I don't know, I can't make it work. I find it very strange. The cohorts seem like a waste of a unit. But just because I'm complaining doesn't mean that I don't like the system. Again, heavily praised it. I'm going to continue to praise it. It's very, very good. So let's talk about the Legacy factions. So they originally said that the Legacy factions weren't going to get any updates. They were just going to be like that. And then they did. You know, they actually did get some rule updates. Skaven's got nerfed. A few changes here and there. They didn't fix the actual big issue, though. That's the big problem. Dark Elves still not fixed up with the Witch Elf situation. I think that's something that I would really like to see changed up. I know that they don't want to push too much onto the Legacy factions, because at the end of the day, they're not the big sellers, and most of that stuff is in Age of Sigmar, so it kind of follows on that. But it's important for them to update these things, because that keeps people buying models still. You're still incentivized to buy Ogre Kingdom models, for example, or Dark Elf models, which are still available for the Age of Sigmar, Cities of Sigmar faction. The more that gets updated, even ever so slightly, is going to keep people playing the game. There are people who did not want to play Warhammer The Old World because their Dark Elves weren't in there, their Chaos Dwarves weren't in there, and so on. And that is a big issue. I'm looking at it with the idea of going into a potential second edition 3 or 4 years down the line. There needs to be updates for that down the line, so it can keep consistent, so people can keep using their armies, and they'll be more incentivized to then try other armies too. If we end up going to a hypothetical second edition and there is no rules for legends, which I absolutely hate the term though, you know, that's going to put a lot of people off, myself included. Now, I do imagine that the Legacy factions are going to be with us once again eventually. If you go, well, you can't anymore because they took down the map, but in the map, there was so many mentions of the Black Grail storyline, which is a event revolving around vampires in Bretonnia, and it kind of makes sense that vampires will eventually come back, seeing as very recently Age of Sigmar's just had an update to the, well, an announcement of an update to the Soulblight Grave Lords, which is vampires and skeletons and so on. All those new units are no longer called Grave Guard or Black Knights or anything. They're actually called something else, which does kind of hint that the current Grave Guard, Black Knights, all those units are going to start disappearing. Where can they go? Well, to their actual true setting. So I imagine that the vampires will be a faction to come back first. There's too much money to be made from the vampires, even though the Von Carsteins are all pretty much dead. There's loads of other bloodlines. I could imagine that the Ogre Kingdoms will probably start coming back if, like, all these rumors about the Ogre Kingdoms getting squatted for Age of Sigmar are true, because they kind of want to focus more on giants or whatever. That's something I've been hearing about, but who knows if that's true. Dark Elves, same thing. I imagine Dark Elves happening around the same period as First Edition, if we end up getting multiple editions. But that depends on the Age of Sigmar team. You know, they've been hinting at these Shadow Dark Elves for, oh my god, how long now? I think since the first edition of Age of Sigmar. We're in edition 4 now, and still not here yet. Says a lot about the Age of Sigmar release cycle. Yeah, those will have to leave eventually, so that's the big thing. Now, there are some other factions. Demons of Chaos. I don't think we're going to see Demons of Chaos back. I think that they're just going to be made into monogod books, because it's something that looks like it's happening a lot for Age of Sigmar, and also for 40k. It does seem that they're favoring this monogod aspect, which I don't know if I'm kind of keen. I like the idea of being able to use demons undivided, but even then, if you look at the legacy rules for the demons, it heavily incentivizes you to go monogod with the demons, which, I mean, it's not bad, but yeah. And I imagine, again, you know, a Khorne book with mixed Warriors of Khorne, mixed Demons of Khorne, blah, 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 blah. The Skaven, they're not really relevant in this point in the story, so I wouldn't imagine them until far later down the line when the full refresh has happened for the Skaven in Age of Sigmar, where they can justify bringing the old Skaven back. I don't mind the old models. I think that's a big thing. I know people complain about it, but, like, yeah, you know, it's better to paint a regiment of 20 dudes in an old style rather than this whole new age trim here, trim there, and just taking you an absolute age to actually get an army up. Lizardmen, I mean, it's possible. We've got most of the Southlands in the map, so it's not like that takes a long time. And Chorfs, again, maybe second edition. I could imagine all these factions coming back between first and second if we do get multiple editions. Chorfs are one thing that everyone wants. I mean, with luck, right, when the hypothetical Chaos Dwarf release for Age of Sigmar happens, they'll be small scale, so we can actually put them into 25s, and a lot of stuff will just look very much the same. It'll just be updated from the old resin to plastic, which would be lovely, because I would love more Chorfs, but it's getting increasingly harder to find these Chorfs without paying an arm and a leg, and I'm not one of those YouTubers to open up an OnlyFans page. Now the big question is, are we going to get more races for Warhammer The Old World? That's obviously something at the discretion of Games Workshop. We'll have to find out as time progresses, but we do know that sales are looking good. They actually publicly stated that a number of months ago, that they've increased the scope of the game, and that was in a Warcom article, I think with the Chaos Warrior stuff is when they started saying that. But yeah, I mean, we've already got Cafe and Kislev kind of confirmed. Cafe is fully confirmed at this point. Kislev was confirmed, and then they said, oh, there's no plans. But no current plans. But that's always just GW going like, yeah, there's plans, but you get it when you get it, right? Dogs of War was another thing, which looks like it's going to be a big maybe. There have been rumors floating around. Keep in mind that they did say 2 years ago, I can't believe that was already 2 years ago, in the event for Warhammer Fest, that there were no plans for Dogs of War. And I said in that video that I did on that very same day as soon as I left the auditorium, that's likely going to be bullshit, and we are going to get Dogs of War in the future, because they know that that can make money. People are excited to get those old minis, because it's like, oh, I can finally finish my collection, which is a big thing. Like, I've been doing that myself. I've been buying a few things, which, yes, they're not the greatest looking models, some Slayers, but I would like to finish up my collection for a Slayer army, right? But what about the future? What about the potential for proper Southern Realms? Estalia, Talia, people have been saying, that's something that they would like. I think that we would end up getting a proper army for them in the form of an Arcane Journal, a small roster, plastic, all the usual stuff. I think it's possible, honestly. The same thing with Nippon and all the rest. But it depends on the sales of the game. If it's still consistently good, they can actually put dev time into it. It's like what's happening right now with Horus Heresy. Horus Heresy is getting quite a lot of new stuff and even updated models because the Heresy series is doing incredibly well. Mostly because 40k is turning into a bit of a shit show in terms of rules, but yeah, it's making people buy and people are getting more support for it. I think that that's something that could happen. I do subscribe to the theory that we are likely selling a little bit more than Age of Sigmar at this point. Age of Sigmar has not done too well, apparently, for 4th edition, from a lot of retailers publicly stating that, and it kind of makes sense. A lot of people had the bad taste in their mouth after the whole Stormhost was deleted and replaced with brand new models. It's like, yeah, they should have just opened up another Star Chamber in that sense. If you're confused about the Age of Sigmar lore, don't worry, so am I. But I did do my due diligence and ask some Age of Sigmar YouTubers, and that's pretty much what they told me. Alright, now we have to talk about the stuff that hasn't actually changed. No novels. We've got one, which was Lords of the Lance, and let's be honest, that one wasn't great. A lot of people bitch about it because of the female knights and stuff. I honestly could care less about it, because that was established lore in Wahammer Fantasy Roleplay from like 2006 or something. It's more of the case of, like, one, the novel wasn't great because it's very clear that someone was looking at the wiki for a lot of inconsistencies, because, like, the wiki, I know a lot of people visit that. It's a good repository for some basic news, but don't treat that as gospel because, yes, it can be flawed, and it does have a lot of fan stuff in there. And two, I mean, it's just not overall a great book. It's kind of awful writing. There should be more at this point. I don't know what the hell's going on with Black Library, but they have no problem releasing, 60 different 40k books a year, right? Which, I get it, 40k is more popular, but it's about time that the other settings started getting more consistent stuff. Heresy gets a lot of books, but that's because it's tied to the whole Space Marine stuff. It's tied to 40k. It would be nice if we would have had maybe 2 or 3 in a year, because at the end of the day, people want to know what's going on in the setting, especially for the lore, because we don't actually have a lot of information. The Arcane Journals themselves, they're decent, but the lore is essentially what you've seen in the army books for 7th edition, 8th edition, going back then. There's not a lot of new lore, and that does present some problems when there's new people coming in and wanting to learn. You don't actually get a lot of context in those Arcane Journals, or in the core rulebook, or even Forces of Fantasy and Ravening Hordes. Novels do help out to provide more context. It's a massive, massive shame that we still don't have anything else. Maybe it's the poor reception to Lords of the Lance, but anyone who would have read that book in Games Workshop would have gone, yeah, this is likely not going to sell that well, because... oh yeah, we need to, spoilers by the way for the book, but I very much doubt that you guys are going to be buying it. The whole context was stealing people to resurrect, to waken Cetra, which, by the way, Cetra was already awake, right? This is the thing. Cetra united all the tombs, and now they changed that. And they had some cool stuff, don't get me wrong. The whole thing with the Ghoul Kings were cool. Well, mostly ghouls. I don't think there was many Strigoi there. And the stuff with the orcs was kind of fun, but even then, it was just very, very... small. There was a lot going on, and just a lot of stuff didn't make sense. Like that giant mummy thing. It's like, what? What? And it just kind of throws me off. Obviously, it's tying up with the release that's, you know, the Tomb Kings versus the Bretonnians, blah, 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 blah. But where is the Empire novel going around the Civil War, right? Where is a what's going on with Bretonnia book? What's going on with the High Elves? Kislev, you know, now's the perfect time to do a Kislev novel. Cafe, right? You know, we're expecting cafe lore in the books. Like, oh God, I hope so. It shouldn't all be just like that one interview I did with Andy Hall. That would just be awful. There's a lot of talented writers for Black Library. I'd like to see David Geimer. He's a big one that I'd like to see come back and do a novel. Bowden should have a chance in a fantasy book, right? Like he must be tired after doing, I don't know how many books he did for the bloody Horus Heresy series. All I know is that my friend has all of the books. Well, I don't know if there's any more to come out, but like his shelf looks incredible, but it's just like, that's a lot, man. That's a lot. So we ended up with a am I happy, does it live to the hype situation, you know, 1 year in, a lot has happened. So let's talk about it, right? Yeah, so nostalgia factor is still there. I know a lot of people still bitch on that, but yeah, I mean, that's what people wanted. Again, the same thing. It's just Warhammer Fantasy just in the past. That's what exactly we wanted. The setting is still good, which allows for more room story-wise. Again, same as last time. Now, this is where things start changing up a little bit. One, the releases seem to be getting faster, which is a very good thing because people are getting kind of annoyed. There's a lot of people waiting for the Beastmen. There's a lot of people waiting for Wood Elves, High Elves also. Wood Elves, High Elves, Empire, those are the popular ones. It does seem like they are selling quite well. Well, the Empire, that was the one that's out because my local store, I saw a lot of people buying Empire stuff, which was kind of cool. There's a bunch of new stuff coming out, which is great. You know, we saw the Bretonnian Knight on foot. We saw the new shield bearers. There's been a bunch of new characters too, which is lovely, right? Even generic characters. I think a lot of people have been wanting that. I myself am waiting for the High Elves to come out so I can get that new Shrayson Lord because he looks kind of cool. Very, very first edition, second edition Custodes, right? But I think that's the charm of it. What I will say is there's way too much of a reliance on resin. Which is kind of disappointing. I mean, even the new generic characters, like, it's fine for named characters. I know some people are going to say that's not fine, but named characters generally require a lot more detail. When it comes to generic characters, you want them to be plastic because they're much more better to kit bash with, and I feel that that's a bit of an issue. Those 3 new spellcasters, I had them early, I painted them up, they look really, really cool. Don't get me wrong, they're stunning miniatures, but if they were plastic, they would have allowed for a lot more kit bashes for people to play around with, and they would have been a bit more cheaper price, which I think is a bit of an issue. Resin is very, very expensive, and it's just going to be a bit of a problem, especially for a setting where, you know, you're going to be fielding a lot of characters. What I will say is at least the new stuff is comparable to the old stuff, where it's not a massive, drastic change. Barring the Knights Panther character, he's very, very detailed. But you know what I mean, right? It looks like it fits in Warhammer Fantasy, which is quite important. As long as it keeps around the 8th edition styling in terms of, you know, the model design, I feel like people are going to be very, very happy. And that's something that I'm looking towards, hopefully, for Cafe and Kislev. Highly detailed models wins a Golden Demon, right? That's what a lot of people aspire to. But when it comes to Warhammer Fantasy, or now Warhammer The Old World, you're going to be fielding like groups of 20 multiple times. If you're doing Night Goblins, you're going to be fielding, what, 30? So you can get 3 fanatics per group. This is where things become a little bit problematic. So, yeah, you know, the Knights on Foot, I've got about 20 done. I still need to do another 60. Yes, I know, but I have a plan. I think we're in for a good time, though. I think that we are going to get a decent amount of support as time progresses. Here's hoping we do end up getting proper Southern Realms. Araby would be lovely. It's something that we did have an army for in Warmaster, so it wouldn't be too difficult to translate, obviously changing up some lore bits here and there. I do wonder how it's going to go post-Warhammer 3. I know, yeah, Total War. But it's because I have a sneaky suspicion, and it's kind of like something that a lot of people have been thinking about. A lot of the concept art for Cafe is obviously Total War. So what's going to happen in the future when they don't have CA devs working on that? Because eventually Warhammer 3 is going to end, so it might just get a little bit slower? I don't know. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion. I just wanted to talk about it. You know, 1 year! Big whoop! Absolutely awesome. Hopefully we see it, well, we're here until many, many years after, right? No second end times. Have a good one, guys, and I'll see you all again very, very soon.